Hello again. Here we are with Teach the Shoah. And I'm Jennifer Zunikoff, and I'm here with Lynn Feldman, our Director of Scholarship, and Dena Hirsh, our featured teller. At the coffee houses, which this event is one of them, we get a little bit of extra time with the teller. And for those of you who can stay, it is just an option, but we want to encourage you if you're able. At 9 o'clock Eastern, when the official coffee house is over in an hour, if you want, you can stay for a half an hour more and get to dip in to a mini workshop on Holocaust storytelling, where we listen to a testimony and we learn a little bit about how we do storytelling. So that's we can kick off. So Lynn, you want to put up the slides? Oh, and feel free, everyone, to write anything in the chat about what brought you here tonight and where you live, etc. Even if you're a regular, we would love to hear from you. So here we are at our coffee house. Lynn, I'll let you, I know you're going to do the first few slides.
Okay, so welcome. We are Teach the Shoah. For those who do not know us, we teach Holocaust through story. We do storytelling programs like the one you're attending this evening. We also have interactive programs for remembrance, both interfaith ones and Jewish ones, like From the Darkness and Moment of Witness. We have many resources that can be used by storytellers, beginner storytellers or non-storytellers at all, both for educators and for family members. We run courses and workshops teaching you how to tell stories based on Holocaust testimony. More information you can find on our website, teachtheshoah.org. We have another program coming up. It's an introduction to Holocaust storytelling in March on the 19th, where you get to hear a very short story, 10 minutes, and then you get to actually, as Jennifer said, dip your feet into the storytelling pond by trying out a few small techniques of storytelling. We are also running a project called 80 for 80 Stories from Auschwitz. These are 3-minute stories that are posted daily from International Holocaust Memorial Day, which was on the 27th of January, ending on Yom HaShoah in April. Every day, one story from Auschwitz told by some of our storytellers. The story you are going to hear today from Dena is an expanded version of the one that has already been posted on our social medias and on our website. We have also kickstarted our annual Lassette appeal. This year, we are fundraising for remembering, honoring, and acting on the act of preserving Holocaust memory through story. If you would like to donate for us, and every penny helps, please go to teachtheshoah.org/Lassette. Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lynn, for guiding us, teaching us a little bit about the organization and all the upcoming programs. So now we have an opportunity to drop in to this evening, because next we're going to get some introductory material about Dena and her story, and then we will really be present and listening. So I invite you, if you would like, you can turn off your cameras, or you can close your eyes. I'm going to close my eyes. And we're going to have a few minutes where we just kind of drop in and settle. And I always say to people, you can follow my voice exactly, you can wander off, or you can turn down your volume and just have your own time. You'll see when we all come back on. So I invite you to take a breath and to feel your feet on the ground. And just the reminder, we're entering Tu B'Shvat, this new year of the trees. So what a great time to feel connected to the earth. And as you take your next breath, perhaps you can picture a tree outside your home, or a tree you once visited somewhere in the world. And imagine that the oxygen from the tree is coming into your lungs, helping you settle. And then when you breathe out, carbon dioxide is stretching across your yard to the other side of the world and being received as a gift by that special tree. So just allow yourself to connect to the earth, to your home, to your presence here with us, and to the other people who are sharing the space with us tonight. And with the next breath, just let your shoulders drop and imagine any burdens from the day, the news, anything going on in our lives that just feels heavy. Just let it slip away and again down to the earth, and the earth will catch our troubles. And feel your spine align, and you settle yourself in your chair, prepared to listen. And as you imagine yourself taking in the story, knowing that parts of the story may be hard to hear, know that you can protect yourself. You can take in the story as you need to take it. And let's take one more breath, trusting in the experience in the moment and welcoming ourselves to be as present as we can this evening. And when you're ready, no rush, you can open your eyes and be back here with us. Thanks, everyone. So we are getting ready for our next, I think Marina just came. Hi, Marina, welcome. A few other people might have come when I was doing that. We were just doing some guided imagery to settle into the moment of being present with our storyteller. So thank you, everyone. And now, so let me tell you a little bit about tonight, and then we'll hear more details about Dena's story. So our plan for this session, we just did our guided imagery. And by the way, anytime this evening, or when you're hearing a story, especially a story of the Holocaust, invite yourself to just let in that breath. Give yourself a little space. Let the breath flow inside of you. It's always going to be helpful and help you to be present to the story as well as to yourself. So we did our guided imagery. We're going to listen to a story of the Holocaust. We're going to listen to Dena's story, and we're going to appreciate the story. And for those of you who are new to our process, we mean something more than appreciating, like thinking, wow, that was really important and she did a good job. But where do we really connect? Like, what do we truly appreciate about what the storyteller did? And so we're going to have the opportunity, if we want, to write in the chat or to share aloud what we noticed. And so we're appreciating the story and appreciating what happens in us as we listen to the story. We'll get to delve into our storyteller's process and hear a little bit from Dena about what it was like to create this story and the way she decided to tell it, just to hear very informally whatever comes to her mind in the moment after she's told the story. Then afterwards, for those of you who want to stay, you have the optional 30-minute workshop, an introduction to Holocaust storytelling, and we'll give you a prompt and we'll get to kind of experience a little bit of storytelling ourselves. Thank you. So reminder, I know we've made this quite clear in our advertising and everything I've said so far, but these are Holocaust stories. That means that different people are going to process them in different ways and different levels of intensity. Take care of yourself. If you need to turn off your screen, if you need to get a drink of water, whatever you need to do, we're just glad that you're here and present and welcoming this experience. Thank you.
So, our storyteller this evening is Dena Hirsh. Dena was the daughter of two Holocaust survivors who both fought with the Jewish partisans in the forest of eastern Poland, which is now Belarus. Her mother was the last of a family of 72, and her father survived with two sisters and a brother. Dena wrote her first story about children of the Holocaust survivors in 1993. And Dena lives now in the DC area. She's involved with the Generations After organization, and she is a Teach the Show storyteller. Tonight, though, Dena is not going to be telling us a family story. Tonight, Dena is telling us the story of Margaret Simone Huntman. Margaret was born in Germany. She survived the Theresian ghetto and camp, and she survived Auschwitz. She is the sole survivor of her immediate family. After the war, she spent 1 year in a DP camp, and then she immigrated to the US in 1946, and she passed away in 2013. Dena, I am going to spotlight you, and when you are ready, please begin.
My name is Margaret Simon Hantman. I was born on March 31st, 1926 to Willi and Elanita Simon in Berlin, Germany. My little sister Eva was born 2.5 years later. My father ran a little grocery store. It was called Colonial Vara, and we had a very comfortable life. Nowadays, in the United States, we would probably call us upper middle class. My father worked in the store, and my mother took care of my sister and me and our beautiful big apartment. We were surrounded by family, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. But all of that began to end in 1933 when Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany and began enacting anti-Jewish laws. The hardest thing at first was for me and my sister to understand why our Christian childhood friends no longer wanted to play with us. And their parents and others stopped coming to our store. In 1935, my father's store was taken away from him because he was Jewish. And our apartment was taken away from us as well. For 2 years, though, my father was able to get a job working as a sales representative for a margarine company. And when he was no longer allowed to do that because he was Jewish, he had to work at hard labor, hauling rocks for construction sites. For a while, we were still permitted to attend the regular public schools. At the beginning of one school year, I remember the teacher told the class that you could tell a Jew by the shape of his head. And then he called me up to the front of the class to measure my head. Imagine his dismay when he learned that my head was as round as his. So much for that lesson. But it was still embarrassing to be singled out and to be made to feel like the other. Eventually, my sister and I could no longer attend the public schools. Instead, we had to attend a school only for Jewish students, even though our family was not religious. But there was definitely an upside to that. We were not subject to taunts or bullying, name calling. At the age of 10 or 11, I became interested in the Zionist movement, which had as its goal the establishment or reestablishment of a state for the Jewish people in our ancient homeland in Palestine, now Israel. In the summer of 1940, I believe, it's so hard to keep all of these dates straight. I went to a Hakshara. Hakshara means preparation. This was a work camp where young Jewish people would learn Hebrew and the technical skills they might need to have if they moved to Israel and they lived on a kibbutz. I liked belonging to groups. I felt comfortable there, and especially in this one. I stayed there as long as I knew that my parents were safe from the transports. The transports. Before the war, I thought the transport, the word as a neutral one, simply meaning to move things or people from one place to another. But during the Holocaust, it took on a different and often deadly meaning. By June 1942, all the Jewish schools were closed. Eva worked for the Jewish Gemeinde in an orphanage taking care of small children. But some adults in the Gemeinde had escaped into the underground, the Jewish resistance, where they sought to fight against the Germans. To punish them and to warn others against similar activities, the Germans set up a Straftransport, a punishment transport. And they took all the people from the Gemeinde, including my 14-year-old sister. I later learned that that transport was sent to Riga, Latvia. And when they arrived there, they were forced to shovel trenches, and they were shot and killed there. In December 1942, my parents and I were taken by transport to Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia. The transport consisted of regular passenger cars, although they were extremely crowded. Theresienstadt was generally considered to be a transit camp, a place where prisoners from concentration camps might be kept until they were sent to other concentration camps or work camps. Mischlinge or mixlings were often sent there. While my father's family was Jewish for generations, my mother's grandmother had converted from Christianity to Judaism, which meant that my mother was classified as a Mischling. In German, this very same word is used to describe a dog that is a mutt or a mongrel, not a flattering term. Jewish men who had served with distinction in the German army were also sent to Theresienstadt. My father had been awarded the Iron Cross in World War I for his bravery. Theresienstadt provided a temporary, although still very difficult reprieve from what would come next. The worst part was that the three of us were separated. My father worked at a delousing station. My mother worked sewing with other women, and I was assigned to the Stabsgarten. This was a garden where we grew vegetables for the staff. Occasionally, I would steal a tomato or a cucumber and put them in my uniform and carry them back and give them to my parents. In September 1943, my dear father, Willy, was on the second or third transport for men to Auschwitz. I said goodbye to him, and he made me promise that I would never leave my mother. I made that promise, and then he was gone. The next month, my mother was selected for a transport to Auschwitz. Because I worked in the Stabsgarten, I was exempt from these transports. But I remembered my promise to my father, and I volunteered to go with my mother. When arrived in Auschwitz, the German officer on the platform motioned my mother to the left with one thumb and me to the right with the other one. I didn't know what that meant then. The last image I have of my mother is of her turning back to look at me over her shoulder, with tears streaming down her face. And then she was gone, and I was all alone at the age of 16. Then they took the women and older girls to the showers. First, they shaved my head, all my beautiful hair gone. Then they ordered the women to take off everything. The first thing I removed was my little Magen David, my little Jewish star necklace that I had worn since I was an infant. You could see the little teeth marks on it. I put it in my hand. And when I thought no one would be watching, I popped it into my mouth. As I took off my clothes, a small piece of paper floated down to the floor. I picked it up, and it was a picture my sister Ava. I don't know how it was that I had this picture with me. I quickly folded it up and put it in my mouth. After the shower, they gave us clothing. Clothing. They gave me a thin little nightgown that barely covered my body, much less provide any warmth. Then they marched us to the barracks. When I got to my bunk, I took out the necklace and the picture, and I hid it under the mattress so that the Germans wouldn't get it. At a time when the Germans were taking everything from us, including our lives, I was determined to keep these things from them. Another prisoner saw my picture one day, and out of the straw from the mattresses, she created a little frame for it. Such a gift. Wherever I went during the war and after, I took these items with me. I don't know where I found the courage. I was not the type of person who took chances in life, but somehow during the war I did. 3 weeks after I arrived in Auschwitz, there was another selection, yet another transport. The women and girls were in 2 lines divided by thick, scratchy, dark ropes. Of course, we had no idea where the transports were going. But even after only 3 weeks in Auschwitz, I knew that anything had to be better than this death camp. While I was waiting to move forward in my line, I saw a Czech girl near me in the other line, and she was crying. I asked her, "What's the matter? Why are you crying?" She pointed to a girl, a couple people ahead of me in my line, and she said, "That's my twin sister. And she is in your line, and I'm in this line." I asked her, "So do you want to switch lines with me? You could just go ahead of me here, and I'll go to your line, and then you can be with your sister." She nodded her head vigorously. And then I said to her, "But we must also exchange names, because the Germans know who's supposed to be going where." "What is your name?" "Ava Polakova." Ava, same name as my little sister. "I will take your name, and you will take mine. I will be Ava Polakova, and you will be Margaret Simon." When there were no guards watching, we quickly switched lines. And until the end of the war, I was Ava Polakova. I never saw the girls again, but I did hear from some Czech people after the war that they had made it out alive, thank God. The 3 of us had made it out alive, but they were the lucky ones because they survived together while I had no one. My transport ended up in Sakish Kudova, which was a subcamp of the Gross Rosen concentration camp in Germany. I worked in the airplane factory, which was attached to the camp, cleaning the machinery. I was there until the end of the war. Sakish just had barracks, no gas chambers or crematoria like Auschwitz. It was just a place where prisoners like me from concentration camps and other people like Czech workers worked. But we still only got 1 piece of bread each day. There was one Czech gentleman there who reminded me of my father. He was about the same age. Every day when he saw me in the factory, he would either blink to the left or to the right. And I soon learned that in whichever direction he looked and blinked, he would have hidden a piece of bread for me. And I quickly learned to find those pieces of bread. You can't begin to understand how much that piece of bread and that Czech man's kindness meant to me at that time. I never learned the man's name, and I never got to thank him, but I will never forget him. In April of 1945, airplanes were dropping flyers from the sky announcing that the American President Roosevelt had died. We thought our great savior had died and that we would die soon too. But instead, a few days later, the German guards were getting very jittery and they gathered us all up and told us that we were going to be marching 5 kilometers into Czechoslovakia. And then they let us go. The town was Nachod. We were all taken in by Czech families who treated us so warmly. My family fed me and gave me clothing, and then they allowed me to take a long, hot bath. I was in there so long, they thought maybe I had killed myself. After that, I decided to go back to Theresienstadt to see if my family had gone back there. That's when I learned what happened to Eva and that both of my parents had been murdered in Auschwitz. From there, I was sent to the Deggendorf Displaced Persons Camp, Germany, in Bavaria, in the American zone. That camp would host almost 2,000 Jewish survivors between 1945 and 1949. In Deggendorf, I became part of a theater group that put on productions for the camp. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum has a picture of a group of us in costumes that looked like the American flags. Because Deggendorf was just for Jewish refugees, they had such things as a synagogue, a kosher kitchen, 2 newspapers, vocational training, and even their own currency, which was backed by a bank in Munich. Imagine. I met Felix Huber in Deggendorf. He had been in Theresienstadt and Auschwitz, but I didn't know him then. He was 13 years older than I, but he became my boyfriend. He knew that he was going to New York. His father was already there and a brother. And I realized I had a very important decision to make. Where did I want to live? I knew I didn't want to stay in Germany or in Europe at all. I thought about Palestine. I'd already received some preparation for it. But after the war, I realized I didn't know anyone there. The only relatives I did know were in the United States, and I was desperate to be with family. Felix and I arrived in New York Harbor in May 1946. We traveled on the SS Marine Perch, which had been a troop transport for US troops during the war. But now the ship was carrying Holocaust survivors to a new country and a new life. When we pulled into New York Harbor and I saw the Statue of Liberty with her right arm raised and the torch of freedom in her hand, I felt safe for the first time in a very long time. And for the first time since the war, I cried. After a couple of weeks in New York, I traveled to my father's Cunny, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her name was Lani Loventhal. I called her Tante Lani, Aunt Lani. I had met her a couple of times when she visited us in Berlin before the war. After she discovered that I had survived the war, she got in touch with the Jewish agencies that were charged with the arrangements for bringing survivors to the United States. It felt so good to hug and be hugged by a relative. After a few weeks there, I went back to New York. In addition to Felix, I had friends from Deggendorf. I already had a room and I had a job. Felix and I married a year later, and we had 2 children. My son, Freddie, was named after Alfred, Felix's father, and our son, Elaine, was named after my mother, Ella Anita. Felix died in 1970. He was only 57 years old. And in 1971, I married Jack Hontman. Of course, I brought my Magen David necklace and my picture with me to America, and I kept it in a drawer in the nightstand by my bed. In 2018, my children convinced me to donate these 2 precious reminders of our family history to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum as proof that I had lived and that my murdered little sister had lived. These were things that Hitler could not erase. So, this is my story. Actually, I don't like calling it a story because stories are sometimes true and sometimes false and sometimes a mixture of both. Perhaps I should say this is my truth. These are my facts. I tell my truth so that others may learn from it, to prevent such horrors from happening to any group of people anywhere in the world.
Oh, thank you so very much, Dena. Let's just take a breath and let the story just continue to drop down into us for a few more moments. Oh, goodness. Wow. Dena, may I give you some appreciations?
Please.
I am truly, I don't use this word very often, but I'm truly gobsmacked. I am truly, really, really, the way that you embodied her. I had to keep shaking myself to realize, no, this is Dena. This is Dena. Oh my gosh. I have so many notes and I got to the point where I stopped taking them and I just thought, I need to just listen and be present. So what I'm going to share with you is just some of the images that have stayed with me. And not just images, just certain things. Some of them are images from the story. Some of them are things you did. So let's just see what happens. And everyone else, please know this is part of our process at Teach the Shoah. We hear a story. We give appreciations to the teller. And please, you can do that as well. So I invite you right now in the chat to write any appreciations you want of Dena or the story. And later we'll have some time to share aloud too, but I get the privilege of getting to share this first. So often when we are doing the coffee houses, I have coached the person. In this case, I had not. Lynn, as you can tell, was a marvelous coach. And Dena, as you can tell, was a marvelous storyteller. And this is really unusual for me to just get to hear it for the first time in this way. And you're reminding me so much of the power of what we do here. Because I am hearing the story, not as a teacher, not as a coach, as a listener, like everybody else. And I am just, I learned things I did not know. Absolutely. There was, of course, so many familiar spaces, but there was so much I learned in the way you wove the history absolutely seamlessly. If I wasn't listening for it, right? It just went right in with the story. This was her experience with this happened in 1941. This is 1942. And okay, so I'm going to tell you a few things. Some of it will be near the end because that's what's kind of washing over me first. The hug that she felt with her relative. It was her aunt, right? Or cousin?
It was her cousin,
Her
actually.
cousin.
She called her Tanta, but she was a cousin.
Right, that's Tanda. Okay. So the feeling and the way you stayed with that hug, you didn't just tell us that she hugged you and it felt nice, but you were in the hug. And we could feel like we got a sense of what that would be like for a person who has not felt safe for so long to not only see the Statue of Liberty and all that it represented to her, a place that she could finally be safe and finally cry, finally release what her body is meant to release. It wasn't even able to. And then soon after to be hugged by another human being who shares her blood, who is in this safe place. I mean, that was just, I felt it in a way that I couldn't have felt if you hadn't given us the time. That was something I noticed throughout, that you really gave us the time to process. The two lines where you and Ava were, you and Ava were in the line together. Your face when you found out that her name was Ava, it was like we were really watching you hear your own sister's name and take this on like it was a gift to carry. And the look in your face when you saw that she and her twin had made it. It's like that you were in this together, and yet the longing for your own sister. All right, I'm gonna look at my notes for a second. There was I'll try to keep it to 1 more minute because I really want to let other people talk. The word transport, the way you said before, I thought this was a neutral word. And we know what's coming just the way you say that, like how things change, how words had completely different meaning and places had completely different meaning. That really hit me. The explanation of your family, you said your family, of your mother having the one Jewish parent and the not Jewish parent, and how the not Hebrew, the German word was the same as the word for mongrel or mutt. The way you said it, it was like I was learning this. The things I didn't know, I was learning anew from you. Just really feeling with that it's not just a fact that this word meant this, that I felt what it was like in this girl's body to know her mother was called this word. The whole part about Teresium, when you talked about it as a temporary reprieve, that such a place was a reprieve is such insanity. And yet I felt the disturbance of that and the truth in a weird way of that comparatively as well. The thick, dark ropes. I mean, there was so many things that you gave. I'm going to stop here and let other people speak. But seriously, I hope another time that I can listen again and tell you everything, because it was outstanding.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Outstanding. Thank you. Woo! Look at all these, look at these coming in, and you will get this. Lynn will send you all that. So Lynn, I need to let you talk next.
Dena, may I give you appreciations?
Please.
So I'll start with my favorite part of the story, which is, and the head just doesn't measure the way they want it to measure. Like if there wasn't a bigger you, then I really don't know what there is. I love that because it shows us life in Germany pre-war And although we say, okay, there was no Auschwitz, there's no gas chambers yet at that point, but kids in school get their heads measured because they're Jewish and they're pointed out and ridiculed in front of their classmates. That is a very powerful thing, both in the story, but also as an educational point. So I love that. Thank you for having that in the story. The whole progression that you have, and keeping most of the time your voice very monotonous until there are certain words that are a trigger. So Jennifer has already mentioned one of them, the transport, for one. But this kind of repeated itself in a way, or softening your voice when you got that, when she gets this little frame for the picture, and how that is important, and how that shows not just the importance of the picture to her, but the solidarity between the people in that barrack, or between the women in that barrack. Of course, the whole Auschwitz scene is fantastic, but also everything that happens afterwards, post-war, right? The story never ends with just, okay, so we were liberated and everything's great. It's not, things happen. But yet in the DP camp, we return to life. So much so that she's even in a play and she is meeting people. So we usually hear in the DP camp stories of either people getting married and having babies, or, people trying to escape through the Bricha movement and come to mandatory Palestine. Here we hear there's life, there's going back to life, there's theater, there's other things in the DP camp. So I love that you bring that forward into the light. And of course, afterwards, having that one relative that you can go and hug. And how important is it to be with family, even if it's not her parents, even if she couldn't keep her promise to her father, she still has that one thing that kind of grounds her back into her family. Altogether, that was amazing. Thank you so, so much. And I really appreciate all the work you've put into this. I know you've worked very hard. How are we doing for time? I think we can open the floor for a couple of appreciations apart from what there is in the chat. Violet.
Thank you. Dena, what can I say? I am so very proud of you. I have watched you grow and grow and just take to this like a duck to water. This story, as I listened, I felt as if I were listening to a story that someone was telling at their kitchen table. And I ate it up. Thank you so much. And please continue. Find more and share. This was excellent.
Oh, that's Lynn's job. Lynn is the one who found this story and told me, Dena, this is the one you should tell. And she was right.
Kathy.
There we go. Dena, this was a tearjerker in a good way. I was just amazed at everything this woman was put through, and the way that she picked herself up and kept going, and then the decision to go with her boyfriend to America because at least then she would know somebody. And I mean, the hug with the cousin was also beautiful. But I'll tell you what made me cry was that whole thread of the Magen David and the picture in the frame that went through the whole story, and you watch her keep it with her through all this. And then to find out at the end that her children have convinced her to donate it to the Holocaust Museum. And that statement, it was proof that I lived and that my sister lived. And I was bawling. It was beautiful.
Thank you,
Thank you
Kathy.
so much.
All right, friends, you can continue to appreciate Dena in the chat, and we're going to do.
Oh, Lynn, do we have time to get Jeannie?
Sure.
Is that okay? Because Jeannie and Dina are such dear friends and colleagues. I wanted to give her a chance.
Jeannie, the floor is yours.
I just want to say, I know you, Dina, and I know this is not your family story, but I kind of suspended disbelief. I was so immersed in your telling that you made it your story. And the way you spoke and the way you modulated your voice and your gestures and your it just everything came together to make an incredibly compelling story that I was just hanging on. I have heard bits and pieces of it before, but hearing the whole thing, I was like on tenterhooks waiting to hear what happened next and what happened next. Very, very good. Yasher koach.
Thank you, Jeannie, my cheerleader.
Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, I'm going to bring our slides back up. And Dena,
Okay.
tell us a bit about what we're looking at.
The picture on the left, as it says, is Margaret's Star of David necklace. And I enlarged this. I got this off of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's website. And I enlarged it. And I got a magnifying glass. And you can see the teeth marks on it. You truly can. And then, of course, the other is the picture of her sister, Ava. And you can see how the straw was used to make a little frame for it. And to think that she carried these things. And in her interview with the museum, she says, she was asked, well, where did you carry them? She, anywhere I could, anywhere I thought they would be safe. Sometimes that was in her mouth, sometimes it was in her clothing, but anywhere where I could keep them from the Germans. And that's the costume. And Margaret is second from the right. And there were a number of productions. This was not the only one she was in, but this is the one that became somewhat famous. And this too is at the Holocaust Museum. And these show the different places where she was. I can't really point them out from here, but you have them in Berlin, Germany, and then they're in Theresienstadt, they're in Auschwitz, then she's in Deggendorf, she's in Czechoslovakia, and ultimately she settled in New York.
Which is outside of this map.
Yes, outside of this map. By the way, when her husband died, and that is Margaret, and we don't look at all alike, but that is why I took my glasses off, because she doesn't wear glasses.
So, Dena, tell us a bit about your process in creating this story.
Well, I took my cues from Teach the Shoah. I started out with one scene, and I knew that it had to focus on Auschwitz, so I only took from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz for the 80 for 80. So I only had 3 minutes. And the first scene goes through where she has the picture in a little frame. And then I used the same story for a series of trainings that Teach the Shoah did for the generations after. And I thought, okay, now it's time for scene 2. And scene 2 was, now I'm trying to remember which scene is where. The next scene is when she goes to Auschwitz with her mother, and when her father leaves her, and then the third scene is in Auschwitz still, where she's in line to go God knows where, and she meets Eva Polakova. So that was the beginning of that was the 10-minute talk. And then when Lynn presented me with this opportunity, I knew there was obviously so much more to her truth. And by the way, there's a survivor in our community, Nessie Godin, talked about a force of nature. And if you said something about Holocaust stories, she would stop you. It's not a story, it's history, it's fact. Don't call it a story. And when I saw that Margaret had said something similar in her testimony, I thought, oh yeah, that's got to be in there. But there were so many interesting little stories. The thing about the head, working in the Stabsgarten. There were just so many more interesting facts. The leaflets flying down announcing that Roosevelt had died and the impact it had on the prisoners, and the reception she got when she got to Czechoslovakia. And they're thinking that she died because she spent so long in that bath, one of which she probably hadn't had in 5 years. There was just so much material there from which to choose. But I must say that this is the first time I've told, or this story is the first story I've told it in the first person. And Lynn is smiling because she kept trying to get me to do it. But it wasn't until she presented me with this story that I said to myself, first I said, 3 minutes, you could be almost anyone. But the story so resonated with me that I knew I could expand upon it, and I felt I could carry it off.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for doing first person, although it is not a must, but some stories, as you say, just request it. So let's take a minute just to go over the difference of telling your own family story to progressing to tell a testimony, which is not related, but maybe assigned. It's not the first one I've assigned to you, but in this case, in this case, I feel like you connected with it more.
I definitely did. I definitely did. When I tell my parents' stories, my father's, my mother's, they were both in the underground, but there aren't any stories about my mother in the underground. The only stories I have of my mother come from the same source as my father. They come from my father. And somehow the thought of portraying my mother was more daunting because it's closer. I'm named after my mother's mother. And my mother had after the war, had a very fragile makeup. She had a couple of different nervous breakdowns. And so I did not ask her much. But my dad grew up in the same area and he knew her family. And so I was able to get from him information about my mother and her family. Whereas my father could talk forever. And we gave him a recorder and we went, go for it, Dad. And he did. And the US Holocaust Memorial Museum has, I think, 10 or 12 hours of him on tape. And he's also the Shoah Foundation. And I love that one even more because I can look at him and I can see him. And that is truly a blessing.
Dena, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. and for the push.
My pleasure. Jennifer, would you like to move us forward? Oh, of course, this is the sources that Dena used directly from the testimony, the recorded testimony.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you, everyone. Wow, let's take a breath. Oh, and yeah, I was gonna say you can put that on the slide. Thanks. I really just want to say again, thank you, Dena. The incredible scholarship that went into this, the hours and hours of putting this together. This was so apparent. And the incredible skill as a storyteller and the compassion that you brought. It was really, really this having our buddies who come regularly and having new people to hear you tonight is a gift to our whole community. It shows what is possible with storytelling. So let's just take a big breath, and you might want to stretch your arms. And I have the urge to give myself a hug, because that hug in the story, if you want to give yourself a hug, that hug in that story, I could feel in my bones, and the feeling on the skin of a soft, like a soft female relative, you know, where you just like bury yourself into her. Like that is the most lovely feeling. I'm getting very emotional. I felt like that with your story. You helped us know Margaret and her family and her love for the people around her. So let's go safely out of our program. For those of you who are not going to stay for our workshop, let's take another breath. You can close your eyes if you like. Feel our feet on the floor. Let ourselves be really grounded in the here and now. And let go of what we want to let go of. Hug in what we want to stay with us. Again, release what we need to let go of. If you want to give yourself a little shake. And may you go to bed and have sweet dreams and be ready tomorrow to do the work that you're meant to do in the world and share the stories you're meant to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe have a hot bath.
Would you say, Lynn?
Maybe have a hot bath.
Yes, maybe have a hot bath. Yeah, that would be great.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. On behalf of the whole of the Teach the Showa team, Dr. Deborah Fripp, who's not with us today, our executive director, Mrs. Violet Neffholz, who is here with us tonight, our VP and co-founder, Jennifer, myself, Cantor Karen Weber, and of course, Dena. Thank you so much. So just a quick reminder, you have another workshop with us on March 19th. And our Lisette appeal. And please do stay in touch with us. We are Teach the Showa, so all our emails end with Teach the Showa. Deborah at Teach the Showa, Lynn at Teach the Showa, Jennifer at Teach the Showa. You can also find us on YouTube and on Facebook and on Instagram. Just click in Teach the Showa. Thank you all for joining us.